Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm really excited to bring you today's video. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's get started. On a hot summer evening in 1947, sailors off the coast of Indonesia were startled by a strange sound coming from their ship's headphones. The sea, usually calm, suddenly felt uneasy, and a radio message broke the stillness of the air. A scream, starting with, "All personnel are dead," echoed with a chilling coldness that sent shivers down everyone's spine. The following words were panicked, fragmented, like a storm. "The situation is fatal. Help us." The ship, SS Ourang Medan, was once a frequent sight on the Indonesian seas. It had been missing for some time and no one had heard from it. However, this message seemed like a scream from the depths of the ocean. No one knew where the signal had come from or why the ship had disappeared. The radio waves reverberated, like a ghost over the silent sea. Slowly but surely, another ship, one dispatched to respond to the distress signal, set course for SS Ourang Medan. The history of that ship stood like an unknown disappearance. As the captain sailed towards the lost vessel to investigate the eerie message, the dark sky loomed like an elongated shadow reflected on the sea's surface. Everything seemed to deepen the unease of the crew. The sky was no longer innocent. The suddenly rising wind stirred not only the surface waves of the sea, but also seemed to awaken something much deeper beneath. As the team neared the location of the mysterious signal, the strangeness of the situation grew with each passing minute. The silence over the sea seemed to deepen the shadows. At the same time, the wind rising from the sea seemed to weigh heavily on the sailors' souls. Yes, something was there. But what? The lost crew of Ourang Medan still kept its mystery, and it seemed like a memory that existed in a world where time itself had slowed. After the distress call, no trace was found of the route on which the Ourang Medan had disappeared. Everyone had heard the signal, but no one had managed to escape this terrifying disaster. Now, those who followed the path of the lost ship had only one question in their hearts. Was that last message the final cry of a life, or a harbinger of a much deeper secret? After receiving the distress call, another ship quickly headed towards SS Ourang Medan. The ship set out to find the source of that previously unheard, terrifying message. As it moved slowly but surely forward, the sea grew, colder and more alien with each passing minute. The old sailors' route seemed to draw them deeper, like a trap. Once magnificent in its massive structure, Ourang Medan had carried freight with the sound of its creaking ropes, each step filled with power. But now, everything was different. As they approached the deck, the ship was shrouded in an eerie silence. The crew of the approaching ship, when they saw it, were bewildered. The Ourang Medan had been abandoned. There were worn-out old paint marks on the walls, but everything seemed to have merged with time, like the memories of a forgotten past. Everything was frozen, as if touched by the cold wind of the early morning. Hours. The deck was covered by a sharp silence like a blade. The ship's body felt empty, as though it was following the spirit of something gone. There was no movement. The only sound from the wooden planks was the haunting rustling carried by the wind. There was something strange, but what was it? As the sailors stepped forward, they shuddered, glancing around. Everything they saw seemed to carry a ghostly stillness, but the oddity was not something visible. The biting coldness carried by the wind seemed like the harbinger of death. There were no sounds, but there was a weight to everything. It was as if they were witnessing the silence before a catastrophe. The cold breath rising from the depths of the sea seemed to carry with it a thick smell of death as it advanced toward the ship. As they stepped aboard, the crew exchanged glances. Everyone felt that something was there, but they couldn't understand what. One sailor took a deep breath before stepping forward, scanning his surroundings. Yet everything seemed to deepen the silence of what was once a lively place. With each step, the cold air of the sea was pulling toward their bodies, and they could feel that terrible whisper coming from the ocean. But the inside of the ship was silent. When they looked at the deck, it seemed as if all the life that had once existed at the heart of the ship had suddenly disappeared. The ship was frozen like a spirit, as if it were death itself. There was something else. The ship didn't seem to have moved, but it was as if it had shifted from its place. The ground felt like an echo from a lost time. In that moment, those who had abandoned the ship had vanished, but the echoes of those who were gone permeated every corner. There was a coldness, a sadness, a death. One thing was certain. The ship had been purged of everything that once existed within it. It had become like a slowly cooling corpse, silently surrendering itself to the sea, with everything and everyone inside it lost. As the crew stepped onto the ship, a mixture of fear and curiosity, the scene waiting for them was as cold as the ocean's dark secret. On the deck of the Ourang Medan, there was an unexpected silence. The wind rose from the shadows of the sea, wrapping the abandoned ship even tighter. Everything seemed frozen, but the strangest thing was the unexpected sight of the crew's bodies. The ship was abandoned in every direction, but the bodies of those who had once lived there were still present, like memories of a time that should have passed. Each body seemed to be trapped in time, as if frozen in the moment of their death. The traces of fear, terror, were visible in each body, in each glance, in each motion. Their eyes were wide open, as if they had captured a moment of horror, frozen forever in terror. It was as if something had seized them, choking the breath out of them, but the most terrifying part was the way their mouths were open. It seemed as though their mouths had been forced open in a final cry, a scream that seemed to echo from every corner of the sea. Some of their hands were tightly gripped, like fingers, desperately reaching for some dreadful truth. The hands seemed to still be trying to hold on to something. But what was it? What fear? What horror had trapped them in this way? Each body stood silently like a ghost, unable to move but still existing as once living passengers of the ship. It felt as if death had come in an instant, but they had lived for just one more minute. In that moment, they were like lost souls, inside a time impossible to touch, but somehow present in every glance. Strange occurrences followed each other in every corner of the ship. One body seemed to have tried to chase after something in its final moments. Another's legs were stiffened in fear. No one could offer an explanation. They were all together, but not a single word was whispered. This was a transition point, between life and death. Yes, something was there, something was felt, but what? That terrifying and ambiguous void was disappearing among the frozen gazes of the dead. For a moment it felt as if you could feel the disaster the crew had once lived through. But that fear wasn't just a fleeting sensation. Feeling the presence of a force that had been lost in the depths for a moment was like being at the same point as the bodies. It was like a time slip, a return from death. It was as if living that moment as a ghost. Everything was blending together. As the team members examined the bodies, they began to notice traces of another unknown secret within the ship. The ship was not only abandoned, but also soaked in mystery. Why had these bodies taken such positions? Was it from fear? From poisonous gases? Or was there something else? Each new question pushed them a step back, but they could find no answers. In that moment, each body on the ship was like a witness. But what were they witnessing? What truth? And what secrets? The bodies, with their silence, seemed to carry the calm of a lost time. The ship was not just a grave for the dead. It was like a consciousness that had once lived and now trapped everything inside. The dark secret of the SS Ourang Medan continued to pull deeper into the ocean, leaving no trace behind. The ship had once been alive, but now it was merely a grave, a part of uncertainty and lost times. Every investigation made it even more mysterious. There were no reliable records about the ship, what cargo it was carrying, what route it was, on where it was heading. All these questions faded like shadows. The ship had erased all traces of its past. The greatest mystery was related to the cargo the ship carried. Many theories were proposed. Some believed the ship might have been carrying hazardous chemicals. Could a chemical leak have released a dangerous gas that affected the crew and led to their deaths? But no trace supported this claim. Another theory suggested that the crew's deaths might have been caused by a storm or a maritime accident the ship encountered. However, there was no record of any storm. Everything was silent, the sea calm, and the sky clear. There was no sign of a storm. No dark cloud following the lost past. Each hypothesis seemed to contradict the other. The poisonous gas theory could explain the effects of death within the ship, but what could explain the bodies that were so oddly and specifically positioned? The fear and screams the crew had experienced before their death. These were too particular and carefully arranged to be explained by poisonous gas or a storm. The missing captain and crew had died without leaving a trace. All that remained were their frozen bodies in fear and a scream. That death was not just a physical one. It felt like an echo of a call that had followed something. The mystery went beyond the missing captain and crew, carrying the traces of a destruction, a terror. Another hypothesis suggested that all these dark secrets and deaths might have been caused by the influence of something unknown. A being, perhaps, coming from the depths of the sea, perhaps something long lost at sea, had attracted the ship. This might have been a part of the old legends about missing ships. Even then, such events were merely whispered among the people. Each new idea gave birth to more questions, and each proposed solution made the situation even more complicated. Neither gases nor storms, nor the mystery of the sea. None of them could explain the terror and disappearance of the SS Ourang Medan's dead crew. There was something deeper, something more terrifying behind it all. But what? That big question hung in the air like a ghost. The darkness left behind by the ship was not just the sea, but everything that had once existed. The Ourang Medan was not just a lost ship. It was the very embodiment of uncertainty and oblivion. The death of its crew became an eternal legend, lost in the sea. The traces left by the SS Ourang Medan were like echoes of a lost time, a vanished past. However, the strangest thing was the absence of any official record about this ship. No radio communication, no reliable report, and no verifiable document. The only thing left was a story whispered by a lost legend. When the ship disappeared, no records were found. Even after that terrifying message, no one made an official statement confirming the existence of the Ourang Medan. Radio signals, frozen bodies, abandoned decks. These were just the terrifying and lost mystery of the sea. But the absence of a lost ship's record was an even stranger question. Some people questioned the reality of the event. They claimed that the existence of the Ourang Medan was nothing more than a legend. They tried to dismantle many theories with words. Legends grow and change over time, yet no real trace remains. And perhaps the state of the ship's disappearance was hidden in the very middle of transforming into this legend. Was there something? Wasn't there? No one could say anything for certain, but one thing was clear. Everyone had somehow heard of this lost ship, somehow learned about it. The ship was not just lost, it was like a foggy, uncertain memory of a time. From which port did it depart? Where was it going? It wasn't recorded anywhere, neither at the bottom of the sea nor in a lost archive. Everything seemed to have vanished all at once. Nonetheless, some brave sailors and researchers continued to track the mystery. But they, too, could not make any progress. Each investigation felt like trying to place a lost piece into a puzzle. No matter how deep they tried to go, every trace pulled them one step further back. The Ourang Medan had always existed, but it never fully seemed to have existed. A ghost ship, both everywhere and nowhere. Looking at the missing records, it felt as though there had never been any recollection of the ship's existence. Many people thought that this lost ship was merely a fable. But that dark silence conveyed just how much fear had once been buried behind this ship. Those who pursued the lost, searching for every trace of the vanished vessel, ultimately found themselves lost in a time that had disappeared, in a story that had been erased. On one hand, the erased past of the Ourang Medan had merged with the sea. On the other, that lost ship continued to drift, like a secret. The mystery of that moment might even have been beyond time itself. As time passed, the name of the SS Ourang Medan became a legend whispered among sailors. The tale of fear, mystery, and the unknown slowly merged into the depths of the oceans, yet it never truly disappeared. In every retelling, there was a trace suggesting that the souls of the ship somehow cried out one last time before returning. In every eye, there was a fear related to the lost ship of the Ourang Medan, but also a desire to uncover the true secret behind these dead. Some tried to explain the ship's catastrophe as the influence of a dark force, The captain and crew, perhaps, had made a pact to capture those terrible entities. That being perhaps coming from the depths of the sea, or perhaps the voice of the unknown had lured them into a trap. And then each of them, gripped by fear, screamed out in a final attempt to survive. That scream was the ship's last moment, but it was also the essence of its mysterious deaths. Others believed that this tragedy pointed to a spiritual collapse, a kind of punishment after death. Perhaps these were the reflections of souls trapped in the dark waters of the sea, trying to transcend death. The souls that could not leave the ship were somehow trapped in an endless fear, forever caught in those cold seas. They cried out their fears, leaving behind bodies that were frozen in time, seemingly alive yet equally dead. However, no matter how many investigations were conducted, it was impossible to say anything for certain about the missing SS Ourang, Medan. Each story provided a different perspective. Each theory questioned the other. No one could know what really happened there that day. The bodies inside the ship were not victims of poisonous gas, storms, or any unknown catastrophe. Those who lost their lives had followed something. Perhaps their lost souls were part of a secret pulled down to the depths of the sea. Over time, the Ourang Medan became not just a lost ship, but also a symbol of the sea itself. Lost in its depths, yet never completely erased, it became an undying legend. The story echoed through the dark waters of the ocean, a reflection of the final screams and the lost souls. The ship's disappearance, like the disappearance of the seas themselves, seemed to be drawn into an eternity. The story may always remain just a mystery, for it will never be fully illuminated. The SS Ourang Medan once lived and now only exists, as a shadow in the cold darkness of the sea, a reminder of the dead and the lost. With each whisper of fear, horror, and the traces of a lost time, the sea will lose another fragment of it, but each time it will grow, becoming more and more of a legend. The lost ship will continue to be a symbol of uncertainty and the unknown.